excellent colleague Katia standing by to take over, but please, please be patient if we should have any hitch during this session. I would also like to take this opportunity to very much thank EU, which is our donor for our We Empower Asia program, which has really enabled UN Women to work with partners on exploring the dimensions of how the unpaid care issue is affecting women's economic engagement. And I'd also like to very much thank Sweden as a very key supporter of gender equality in the region, and I'm very pleased that we have the ambassador joining us this afternoon. Started, we would like to invite you to actively participate in the session using social media. You should be able to see the details. Or what you need to know most of all is that we're using the hashtag #MakeCareCount. So please feel free to tweet from this session, and please use that hashtag #MakeCareCount. Thank you very much. So I'm very pleased to see that we have a lot of participants in the room already, and I know the number's still going up. So I'm looking forward very much to a very interactive and interesting discussion this afternoon. So let's get started. I would like to first of all hand over to His Excellency Staffan Herström, who is the Ambassador of Sweden to Thailand, Myanmar and the Lao PDR. And he has very kindly agreed to give some opening remarks to us. So welcome, Staffan, and I hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Unpaid care and domestic work, that's the starting point for this session. It is seldom made very visible. Still, its value is just stunning. At least 10.8 trillion US dollars, based on an estimation of unpaid wages on the global level. How much is that? A lot. 3 times the size of the global tech industry. And it's first and foremost performed by women. 3/4, 76% to be exact. Women perform most of the unpaid care and domestic work. Hence, they are prevented to realize their full potential in terms of paid work on the labor market. It is as simple as that. But again, too seldom made visible. In spite of the potential economic gains of women taking their equal share of paid work on the labor market. In Asia Pacific, the potential gains from gender equality have been estimated to add 4.5 trillion US dollars to the regional GDP in 5 years. 58%, more than half of that increase, is expected to come from improving women's labor participation. But the trend here looks different. Asia Pacific is the only region in the world where female labor market participation is actually decreasing, from 55% 25 years ago to 50% 2018. In Thailand, the country where I'm based, women undertake 173 minutes of unpaid work daily, almost 3 hours if I count right, against men's 56 minutes, less than 1 hour. And the pandemic has added to the burden on women. Lockdowns have become a strong driver of housework at home. School closures have left billions of children in need of care, and gender-based violence has sadly increased additionally. I've been asked to share some experiences from Sweden in this regard, and it's fascinating to do that since so much has changed during my lifetime. During the 1950s, when I was born, around 30% of women in Sweden had paid work. 2019, the figure was almost 77%. And additionally, now we have an explicitly feminist government. I don't think they used that vocabulary when I was born in 1955. Now, how did this happen? Through 3 major factors. First of all, the demand for an increased labor force. Secondly, a strong women's movement, women human rights defenders of their time. And thirdly, a political will to shape a fair and gender equal society. Which were the major reforms? Well, first of all, separate income taxation almost 50 years ago, creating strong incentives for women to enter the labor market. Secondly, development of high quality government subsidized public childcare from early 70s and onwards, reaching full coverage of demand in the early 1990s. Today, 97% of kids between 3 and 5 are enrolled, and we have a high percentage also of the younger children. Point 4, the Anti-Discrimination Act and an explicit prohibition against disadvantaged persons on parental leave. Point 5, paid parental leave from 1974, including for fathers, now compensating 80% of the salary up to a ceiling. And not least, the introduction of what's called daddy's months in the paid parental leave, meaning that 3 months of the total leave are reserved for fathers, 3 months for the mothers as well. But these 3 months, they can't be transferred to the other parent. They disappear if you don't use them. Now, more than 80% of fathers take parental leave, and they use 30%, around 30% of the total time, less than women, but much more than some years ago. Well, I could, of course, make a long list of challenges as well. Everything is certainly not perfect. Women spend close to 1 hour more per day on unpaid work compared to men. Men spend 1.5 hours more per day on paid work compared to women. And there is, sadly, a remaining gender pay gap around 4.5%. But still, so different from the gender unequal environment around me when I was a kid. When my situation, when my mother was working as a teacher, that was basically the exception. Most of the others, they had mothers staying at home. But let me finally underline 2 lessons learned from this. The first one, the crucial importance of organized childcare. And the second one, the need to engage men. Because we've seen that equal parental relationships are clearly linked with the distribution of unpaid care and domestic work. And this is also clearly linked to women's opportunities in the labor market. Many of us men need to change because it's necessary for economic growth. It's crucial for gender equality, but also because we benefit from it as fathers and as human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I really appreciate the way that you've pointed out, how the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this burden of care and how that can really impact women's economic participation, which is already a concern for us in this region, as we've seen a slowing down of that rate of participation. And I'm also very grateful and inspired to hear you share Sweden's experience. And I would also like to thank you very much for being a role model for the way that men need to be a part of the change and for indeed the benefits of gender equality and such social change for men. So thank you very, very much. I think that's the best start we could have had to this discussion. And I hope that you'll be able to stay with us, Stefan, and take part in the rest of the session.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. So before I introduce our panelists, we'd like to find out a little bit more about who we have in the room this afternoon. So in a moment, you're going to see a question on your screen, and we're going to find out a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from. So please take part in the poll. It's quite interesting watching the bars changing as you all fill in your results here. Okay, so this is, I think, our final result. Wow, we can see a very, very diverse audience, as well as, I'm glad to say, a very diverse panel here today. So we have, of course, companies, UN, NGOs, CSOs, representatives from governments and academia, and some others as well. So I'm hoping that the others will maybe make themselves known later during the Q&A. We'll find out more from you. Thank you so much. Now, in a moment, we're going to move to a second question. We're going to understand a little bit more about what you in this diverse audience already understand about the issue of unpaid care work in our region. Okay, so I'm going to just reiterate the question for you. So this is really going to test your knowledge. In Asia Pacific, compared to men, how much longer do you think that women spend on unpaid care and domestic work every day? Okay, so see what you think. Quite diverse responses coming. Okay, so I see that most of you have, yeah, you're split between, the majority is split between people who think it's up to 3 times as much and up to 4 times as much. And some of you think it could be 11 times as much. Now, okay, well, actually, I think we have a very knowledgeable audience here because, in fact, the average, and it is, of course, an average around Asia and the Pacific, is actually 4 times as much. So it means that, on average, women are spending up to 4 times as much time on unpaid care work as their male counterparts. But those of you who chose 11, I'm sorry to say that that is also the case in some countries in our region. National averages do go up to around 10 or 11 times as much. So you are also right. And so we can also see considerable diversity reflected here. So thank you very much for taking part in that. And I would now just like to introduce our video. So this video is really an opportunity for us to think about the ways that the COVID-19 outbreak has really put the spotlight on this issue of care as a, I think I may be going a little bit fast, sorry, on the issue of care as an impediment to women's economic participation. And we know that this is an issue all across the world. We've already looked a little bit at what the data is in our own region. And now we'll just have an opportunity to see some of the advocacy that Oxfam has been doing around this issue. So I'll hand over now to Thank you very much for the video. So I think what we've learned so far, and the reason why we've invited our diverse panel here today, is that we really need partners and collaborators from multiple sectors in order to create an integrated care ecosystem that can address the needs of both care demand and supply sides. And also to be able to ensure that we really are able to support this with appropriate policy, financing, and the regulatory frameworks to make care safe and good quality. I'm very pleased that our panel, which is very diverse, is including representatives of our newly launched regional program, We Empower Asia, which is funded by the EU, as I mentioned before. It includes private sector colleagues who are signatories of the Women's Empowerment Principles, so private sector companies who've made a commitment to really put gender equality into practice in their work. Entrepreneurs who've been funded by the programme, colleagues from the EU, and our important partners such as ILO, who we collaborate with very strongly. So with this, I'm very excited to just briefly introduce the 5 panelists that we have with us today, and you will have the chance to get to know them in a moment. So first of all, we will hear from Ms. Richa Singh. She's Oxfam's Head of Research and Policy in Asia, and she's based in India. Secondly, we will have the opportunity to hear from Ms. Sunita Cherian. She is the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Human Resources at Wipro, which is an Indian multinational IT corporation and one of the signatories of the WEPs, the Women's Empowerment Principles. Thirdly, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Ms. Nadira Yusuf. Nadira is a Malaysian entrepreneur and she's the founder and CEO of Kiddo Care, which is a technology-driven childcare service platform. And then I'm very pleased that we're also joined by Nona Dupre. She is the head of the unit for partner instrument for foreign policy instruments in Brussels, and she has long experience in working with the EC, which, as you know, is our partner in this program. Finally, and not least, I'm very pleased that we're joined by our regional UN colleague, Ms. Joni Simpson. She's a senior specialist on gender equality and non-discrimination based at the regional office of the ILO in Bangkok. So the way that we're going to organize this panel is that I will take us through 2 rounds. We'll start off talking about some of the gaps and solutions to unpaid care issues. And in our second round, we'll look a little bit more at some of the lessons learned and new developments that are emerging from COVID-19. Now, I hope very much that we can have the opportunity also to talk about some of the questions that you, the audience, would like to raise. So I'd like to encourage you to, as soon as you think of something that you'd like to talk about, please put it into the Q&A function. And then we'll be able to hopefully address some of those questions later on in our discussion. Okay, so with no further ado, I would like to have a talk to Richa now. So, hi Richa. So at the beginning of this year, Oxfam launched its Time to Care report and brought it to Davos. So brought it to this very high level of discussion. And together with other partners, including Amnesty International and our own UN Women office here in Asia, you took the lead in formulating a joint blog on unpaid and underpaid care work in the time of COVID-19. So we're very excited to hear from you about the overview of issues. So, Richard, to start off with, could you just tell us a little bit about how Oxfam sees the issue of unpaid and underpaid care work being linked to gender equality, but also to increasing global inequality in general?
So, Sarah, I'm speaking from India, and as I speak to you, our economy, market economy, has come to a grinding halt. But the care economy has been running, and it has been running across the world. And this really brings us to the crux of the issue, that across the world, women have been putting about 12.5 billion hours every day on unpaid care work, but really getting very little out of it. And you have women not just helping economies and societies to survive, but also thrive. Not only are they contributing to the reproductive economy, but as we've heard from this Honorable Ambassador, they're also contributing huge economic wealth to the economy. And yet, they stay at the bottom level. They're not just that they're deprived of the chance to education or to skill themselves, but they're also deprived of the chance of changing the situation, because with little skill, no time for political participation for anything, they're really left at the bottom of the economy and society. And at the same time, and that's the reality of Asia, that you have this 1%, which has been making huge amount of wealth. So women have been losing out on the huge money that they contribute but get nothing, and the wealth is acquired by this 1%. So you can have the topmost paid CEO in Malaysia earning in 10 minutes what a domestic worker works for throughout the year and gets that money. And she could be working, slogging herself, and all that the CEO has to do is hire accountants, invest money in casinos or tourism, and have huge wealth. So that's the kind of economic disparity that the COVID-19 has exposed. Second, we also have been looking at taxation, and we find that a lot of the 1% has been finding loopholes in taxation and finding ways of evading taxation. The money that could have actually gone into creating hospitals, old age centers, schools, infrastructure, which would have really saved a lot of time for women. And in fact, what we found that if just a 0.5% tax is taxed of the wealthiest people, 1% wealthiest people in the world, we would have about 117 million jobs in the care and health sector. So that's the kind of disparity that we're talking about in Asia. And the way we look at it is the most important thing is taxing this 1% as a way of really providing the much needed public services, infrastructure, water, because women have to spend hours to get water just to match their household chores and then go on to the rest of the work that they do. So the kind of legislation that the ambassador talked about is also something that we need in many countries in Asia. There have been initiatives have been made, in Indonesia, for instance, where there's partial recognition of domestic workers, but much more of that is needed. We need much more from business leaders, and again there we have made some initiatives. We have been working with Unilevers, and we have seen a lot of recognition now within the business leaders and managers, and we need to address social norms. So I think now is really the time to address this whole issue of unpaid and underpaid care work once and for all, because that's what COVID has made us realize.
Thank you very much, Richa. Thank you for really setting out the structural inequalities that we're talking about here that are reflected in unpaid care work. I'm just wondering if you'd like to say, you mentioned a little bit around taxation and the kinds of investment needed from the public and private sector. I wonder if you'd like to share a little bit more about some of the other interventions that might be needed to plug the gaps that we currently have in the kind of in having an enabling system to address unpaid care work.
So one, I think there's a huge role that businesses and business leaders can play in bringing this, addressing the whole issue of unpaid and underpaid care work. So we have been looking at, 4 strategies. So one is really a greater commitment to the whole issue and a commitment to which, to fulfilling what is really the goal set out in the SDGs. Second, we also realize that this, besides commitment, it's also working with various business. So as an NGO and INGO, we see a huge role where there is now a growing will within the business community, and to really advocating as to how to address it and how do we go about it, and looking at a target. So we are looking at also not just committing, but also acting. So for instance, having offices of policies at the workplace which address women's unpaid care work, so flexible working hours, parental leaves, childcare centers. So these are very simple solutions which go a long way. Second, we also see a huge role that businesses can play in investing in the kind of technology which would really reduce the drudgery and save time for women. Third, I think there's also the need through advertisements, and we've seen Unilever play a huge role here in having advertisements which show women in a far more progressive role than that is generally shown. So these are some steps that can be taken. Third, we also see that it's not that just one business or one corporations can act. There's really a need for collaboration, because there is a need now to change the larger thinking and the larger infrastructure around the care economy. So a collaboration between businesses, civil society, governments. We also see a huge need for changing social norms and mindsets through public campaigns, through education. So these are the 4 strategies that we've been looking at in Oxfam and working on it.
Thank you very much, Richa. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, this is a good moment, as you've just been talking about the kinds of interventions that we need from different sectors, and including the partnership that's needed with the private sector. I think this is a great moment for us to turn to Sunita Cherian from Wipro, which is a company that's taken a lead really in some of the progressive company policies and practices to accommodate employees' childcare responsibilities. And this is actually reflected in a 93% retention rate of female employees returning to work after parental leave. And Wipro is also actually a signatory to the Women's Empowerment Principles, which I referred to earlier on. Sunita, if I could turn to you now, I would like to ask you if you could please tell us a little bit about Wipro's holistic life stage-based approach to its female employees.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, all. It's indeed a pleasure to be here with you all today. As Sarah had introduced, I represent Wipro. We're a global IT services company. We clock annual revenues of over $8 billion, employ 180,000 people from over 130 nationalities, of which 35% are women. So it's interesting that you should ask about our model and the barriers that I see around us. So first, let me touch a little bit about the barriers before I come into what we've done at Wipro. So I still see stereotyping of roles for which women are suited and social expectations that a woman would contribute disproportionately at home as a key challenge that a woman would face in balancing her career and home. In varying degrees, I would say this has been true if I were to consider the situation, say, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or even now. This is a reason why our Women of Wipro model considered a holistic approach in its design. So our framework is not one size fits all. It recognizes that each life stage, the needs and expectations of women employees are very different. So when we analyzed the flashpoints between her life and career, we saw 3 clear life stages emerge. And all the actions that we've taken is to cater to each of these life stages and how is it that the organization could really help there. So the first was clearly the early stage of career. And this is a stage where she's usually a young graduate, fresh out of college, eager, enthusiastic to make a change in this world. So happily, this is also a time when the familial pressures on her are perhaps the least. So her ability to participate and contribute in assignments without boundaries of geography and timing are much higher at this stage. So what we did is we aligned our efforts to focus on building perspectives and fueling aspiration by giving her a lot of opportunities and projects across technologies and locations. So we found that this helps her confidence and exposure and gives her the platform to be ambitious about her career in the subsequent stages. So the key word here is exposure and how do you really fuel their ambition. The second life stage is when familial pressures and societal pressures start mounting. And this is typically a time when she's gotten married, she's got children, and she needs more time to spend with them and care for them. But she's still in the prime of her career, and she's got experience across a wide range of technologies, has probably managed projects across verticals and geographies, and still has her energy levels are still very high. So it was important for us to recognize these strengths rather than view the flexibility that she required as a factor that would kind of hold us back. And at the same time, it's also important, I would say, at this stage, that there's no compromise on the quality of opportunities that come her way, because that is what builds the platform for further success. And I would also say that from her side, it's equally important for her to not just take the flexibility, but to create a personal ecosystem that supports her career ambitions. So what this means is, don't try to be a superstar, set expectations with family and friends, that they would have to be flexible when there is time, when she needs to take some time at work, and not just for critical situations, but an ongoing basis. So I think establishing this balance is extremely important for her future success. And that's what we kind of, reiterate. When one moves into the third life stage, one is probably in an upper middle management or a senior management role. And having invested in her for so long, this is the time for the company to leverage all that investment for good business results. And the way we've done that is to really empower her to lead with confidence. So at this stage, our mentorship programs, they just help her navigate the so-called power networks and be visible as thought leaders within their field. So this has also positioned them as caring leaders who help build the next wave of managers and leaders within their teams. So in a nutshell, Sarah, that's the WOW framework that we have, the life stage-based approach, which has really helped us in our journey this far. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sunita. And I really appreciated hearing about how you talk about such a human-centered approach and talking about women not as a problem and their families not as a problem, but as people and as contributors and people with with so much growth potential. So that's really interesting and inspiring. Thank you. I'm going to just quickly ask you one follow-up question, Sunita, if that's okay. I just wondered if you could just highlight a little bit the use of the women's empowerment principles as guidance in the process that you've been through at Wipro.
I think the empowerment principles have been good because it's something we can always go back to and kind of measure ourselves whether on where we stand and what further improvements we need. So I think for any organization to say that they have done it all, I think it's a myth. There's always room for improvement, and I really find the principles valuable because it's like our guiding light to kind of show us how far we've reached and how much more we have to do.
Thank you very much, Sunita. And we'll come back to you later, look forward to hear more. I'm going to talk to Nadira now. And as I mentioned before, Nadira is an entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Kiddo Care. And we've already heard from Sunita about the very important role of the employers in supporting women to balance their lives and resolve the issues of unpaid care work. But we know that there's also a need for childcare services that are affordable, accessible, and of high quality. And government has an important role to play here, but we also need to look at the market-based solutions for the childcare issue. So we're very lucky to have Nadira here as an entrepreneur with a young company creating new innovative solutions to the childcare and care issue. And she's also part of our We Empower Asia Champions Network. So Nadira, could you please tell us a little bit more about Kiddo Care and how you as an entrepreneur started this enterprise to provide childcare services?
Thank you. All right. I think the first reason why Kiddo Care was actually started was that we really wanted to look at becoming an intervention or a solution, right? So when we look into the Malaysian market, right? In 2018, the data shows that Malaysia actually requires 38,000 childcare centers, and that's for children aged between 0 to 4 years old. But in essence, we only really have about 4,000 childcare centers. So that's a huge gap to fill, right? And when that happens, you see parents and primarily women step back to take on the role of providing care for the children. And even though there's a whole lot of push by the government to ensure that women participate in economic activities by becoming, entrepreneurs, working from home, flexible working, we all know that it is quite a challenge, especially during these pandemic times when we're at home having to take care of the children and work. There's a really tough challenge in terms of, having to focus and be very effective at work. So most of the time, although we're pushing women to be, entrepreneurs, online entrepreneurs and whatnot, that's still a huge challenge. It is still holding them back. So when we look at this, we're looking at potentials of, how do we look at different models to enable more childcare facilities without even having to build physical facilities, because that's what traditional childcare centers are all about. And while WIPRO actually looked at different life stages of women, we look into the different life stages of children. And as they grow, their needs also grow. So one solution does not fit all, and intervention should come at different stages, as well as, providing that kind of support for parents with children at different stages with different needs. So when we were looking at it, we say, hey, how can we do this using technology to make sure that parents could get access whenever they require? So it has to be flexible, it has to be at their own time, at their own location, with their own duration, because people work very differently these days, right? And it has to be done right? Because the reason why we're seeing a lot of mishaps happening even in Malaysia or around the world is that when you don't have enough of the proper childcare facilities, you take matters into your own hands, and then you let people who don't have proper training take care of your children, and a lot of things happen, and we want to avoid that. So how do we use technology to put in intervention to make sure that parents can actually have access anytime they require, and those who are able to provide the service actually can do it properly? So that's the mantra of KidoCare, providing service through a digital platform and making sure those delivering the service has got the right qualification. So we went extra length in terms of making sure that our women service providers are actually trained. So they're trained in childcare, they're CPR and first aid practitioners and certified. They've gone through our background checks, a whole lot of process to make sure that we do it right. So when that happens, we actually have now allowed, so we've been in operation very young, we're about 1.5 years, but we've serviced more than 12,000 customers in Malaysia now. And we're looking at expanding. So when we look at intervention or providing solution, we're actually looking at both sides. So number one is that kind of solution for parents. Naturally, when we talk about parents, we're enabling women. When we talk about enabling women, so now we're looking into the second group that we're trying to solve. So getting more women to be part of the service providers. So how do we get them to be interested and into coming into the whole childcare industry, right? So largely when we talk about childcare industry, people always think that working in the care sector, especially childcare, it's a low-paying job. It's stressful. It's long hours. How can we change that? How we can get women to be more interested to do that? So KidoCare actually provides a platform for you to come in at an entry level, right, on a gig economy platform, and that allows you to enter, venture, and build your interests and skills within that sector. And as you grow along, so what our platform actually provides is the developmental programs that actually allow you to come in as a babysitter and then follow through and becoming a nanny and childcare entrepreneurs, and that's what essentially we are all about. So KidoCare actually provides services direct to parents whenever they require childcare. And now we've gone into early childhood education as well as children intervention programs, enrichment activities. And we will be, after this, going into elderly care as well, because we see that, women are not just burdened with the care work of taking care of children, but also the elderly. So that's essentially what KidoCare is about, and that's how we started, and this is how we're going to be expanding.
Thank you very much, Nadira, and I really appreciate to hear the thoughts that you have about providing more skills and progression for your care workers as well, because we know that this is a sector where women are often accorded a low status as well as low pay. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe just briefly before we finish, I wonder if you could just reflect a little bit on why you think there aren't more models like yours. I know KidoCare is quite new, but could you just tell us a little bit about why it might be a bit hard for others to get started with this kind of model? Thank you.
Well, number one, I think it's really tough, trying to get the right talent to come in, or to get women to come in and just try it out, right? And it's not just about trying it out, because you need to have the right, the right personality, the right attitude and aptitude towards care. So it's not just about, all women can become carers. No, you need to have that kind of requirements also, right? So that in itself is a challenge, right? And try to shift the whole mindset that care work is low paying. And we talk about providing our carers with good income. That also calls for the market to be able to accept pay that's reasonable enough, right? So if you provide, if you work in a childcare center, so you might be earning salaries that comes, and as a package. But under our model, then you've got to be actually looking for the market, going for the market, and who is able to pay that, right? So that's how these are the kind of challenges that we face. And I think anyone who wants to come into our kind of model will have to look into that. That's the supply side. Where do we get the supplies? How do we get them in? Can we trust them? Can we build them? And then there's the demand side. Will the market be able to pay for this? Are they going to be appreciative of this? How are they going to use it? So these two. And now, of course, technology is also a challenge, right? Because as much as there are many gig economy platforms like Ubers and Grabs, we're dealing with humans. So there will be technology intervention, but there will be a lot more on the human side or human aspect of it. So even though we want to be fast in terms of, let's put in a lot of technology and let machine do the work, let algorithm does the matching, but it is beyond that. It is also understanding human elements and the requirement. So it is a lot of work, and that's why it is very difficult to get, a lot more players to come in and do this. Although we do welcome, because it's just too big of a problem to solve. So yeah, that's some of the things that we can share.
Thank you very much, Nadira. Thank you for sharing those challenges. We'll look forward to come back to you a bit later on to talk more about your experiences. So I think I'm going to turn to Nona Dupre now, our colleague from the European Commission, because I think we're all aware that in order to enable these innovative solutions, we do also need progressive government policies, we need regulatory frameworks for care services and care providers, and we need public as well as private investment. And the EC, as I mentioned earlier, is our close partner at UN Women in implementing the We Empower programme, which really aims to create an enabling environment using these different aspects and different sectors. So Nona, if I could turn to you, I would like to ask you a little bit about what you think is the importance of addressing unpaid care work to increase women's economic participation. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what is really the role of governments in addressing this issue and how the EC is investing at the moment to help to overcome the unequal care burden in Asia Pacific. So Nona, I'll hand over to you now if it's okay.
Yes. Good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm delighted to speak after my distinguished fellow panelists. I've been listening very careful to them, and it's really heartening to see that it can be done, and some people are really working on it, and it also doesn't seem really like rocket science. So we really have to continue to work on this. So first, let me start by thanking UN Women for their ongoing tremendous work on women economic empowerment and for organizing this session. As you have heard from the ambassador, gender equality is really one of the fundamental values of the European Union, and we keep on working hard to ensure that Europe is a great place for women. We have legislation on pay discrimination, on equal access to goods and services, on laws prohibiting sexual harassment at work, also the protection of pregnant women, etc. But we're not there yet. There is a big gender gap still, and also it's very unequal according to the EU member states. We don't have the same situation as in Sweden in all of our member states. So, but we have the EU Gender Action Plan in external relations. We also have the new EU Gender Equality Strategy. So we really want to remain committed to promote gender equality, both within the EU member states, but also across the world. So we are, of course, fully aligned with the women economic empowerment principles. So we do take action to promote gender equality in decision-making in EU politics and also on boards of publicly listed companies, but we're still a way off. So in 2019, we've worked on the EU Work-Life Balance Directive. This entered now into force. That's a very important piece of legislation. It aims to better support work-life balance. We've heard this before from the other panelists. This is a very important aspect of gender equality, to encourage a more equal sharing of parental leave between men and women, and to address the women's underrepresentation in the labor market. So thanks to this directive, there are now additional protections for parental, for paternity, and for carers leave, as well as the right to request flexible working arrangements. The aim is, I mean, this has been said before, but it's not only to improve the work-life balance, but it's also to contribute to an increase in women's employment and families' economic stability, which is also a very important aspect of gender equality. As I've said, the EU efforts are not limited to Europe, but high social and environmental standards and the respect of human rights are also an overarching EU principle that is integrated in all EU policies, internal and external. So for example, we have developed a trade policy, which is based on values to promote sustainable development, economic inclusiveness, human rights, a fair and ethical trade, the fight against corruption, labor rights and environmental protection. And of course, the globalization and in particular, the growing importance of global value chains have led most of EU consumers and citizens, and therefore our companies and politicians, to demand the respect of basic human rights, of social and environmental standards, also outside the EU borders. And we have to recognize, and we really have to work on this, and we have to exercise this power that we as individuals, as citizens and as consumers, we have a strong power to induce change. So, I mean, I speak as a public official, but governments regulate, but citizens also have a role in determining the course of action. We all know that empowering women is the right thing to do. Many studies have shown the benefits that women empowerment can bring economically, socially, and as a fundamental human right. So what we aim to do as EU is to have actions in the field of women economic empowerment to contribute to improve the economic, societal, and social resilience by recognizing that women are key drivers of innovation, growth, and jobs, and also to promote a level playing field and fair competition for business and international trade. So through our program, our common program with UN Women and ILO, through the EU Partnership Instrument, the EU cooperates with partners around the world to translate these political commitments into concrete actions. And I do believe that these efforts are crucial to empower more women to participate in local and global economies. We are all interconnected. We've seen it even more today. Our societies and economies are interconnected in an open global economy where products are produced along value chains that crisscross numerous countries and economies before reaching the consumer. So it's only if we address the issue in every country that we will get through equal economic participation for women. So this is very important in laying the ground for the multiple choices that we have in front of us. We need to work together. Government and the public sector have a key role to play. But as my fellow panelists have shown and have said before, we cannot underestimate the crucial role that the private sector, that civil society and individuals alike have in such a joint effort to achieve true gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nona, and thank you very much in particular for summarizing there, you know, the ways that we need these different sectors and different players to work together. And so really coming after that perspective on the ecosystem that we need for integrated care solutions, I want to turn now to our colleague Joni from ILO to talk a little bit about the research that ILO has been doing about what the future of work in the care economy may look like. So this is important research that ILO has been working on over the last few years, looking at the future of work. And we're especially focused today on your report on care work and care jobs for the future of work. So can you just tell us a little bit, Joni, about what ILO's findings are about what the future of care work will look like and how this could impact women's unpaid care work and women's work in the paid care sector? Thank you very much, Joni.
Thanks, Sarah. So look, it's been a bit of a journey for ILO. We had a Women at Work centenary. As you may know, we turned 100 years last year, and a lot of research was done to myth bust and look forward to see what we could learn. And some of the key findings were around the fact that 70% of women in the world wanted to work in paid care or paid jobs outside of the home, and 66% of men agreed with that if women carried on with the unpaid care work. So, you know, this is really saying something very strong. The research has really pointed to the fact that unpaid care burden is the #1 issue for, although there's a need for an integrated approach, this is the top barrier, and it's definitely the top barrier in this region, but also a big opportunity. And if we look at the statistics, so in the report, we see that 49.5% of women of working age declared that they were not looking for work, or they were not in work because of that care burden. And then you could say that men only had 7% of that situation. So it's really shedding light and showing us that we have this 25% opportunity gap. Of course, there's some women who want to stay home and care for children, but 70% want to work. So we really need to address this issue. And there's no country in the world that has equal engagement in unpaid care. Our ambassador mentioned this as well. And we also heard that it's 4 times as high here in the region. But one of the other things that I find very interesting in this graph here from the care report is that women in this region do the longest days, if we put the paid work and the unpaid work together. And over the last 15 years, the average time women devoted to household work and caregiving reduced only by 15 minutes. And for men, it only increased by 8 minutes in this region. So we've clearly got a situation happening here, because if we don't get over this, we'll be another 208 years before we actually close it. So on to the next slide here. Investing in care. So what we know is that when women are in have families, their employment rates tend to be higher in countries where GDP is invested in public social protection and care services. And I'd like to flag that public is important, because private sector will be able to serve a certain category of workers, and it's important. But the public service is more there for making sure that those women who are in the informal economy, who are unable to afford a care provision, can get access to it, and women and men alike, I should say. So throughout Asia and the Pacific, we know that there are investments in care happening, but what we do know is that the investments are not enough. So if we're rendering the unpaid care visible, I'd like to mention that in this region, 8.9 billion hours were spent in unpaid care in 2018, every day. And that's equivalent to 1.1 billion people working 8 hours a day with no pay. So these are telling figures of importance of rendering this care issue. And there's a lot of work right now looking towards actually investing in rendering GDP broader and including unpaid care. And there's a new statistical definition to include unpaid care in all of our labor force and time use statistics. So this element of investing is indeed important, as it's already been pointed out. The aspect of aging population in this region is a huge problem for many of the East Asia countries, and it's coming online in Southeast Asia as well. There will be a need for more care services. And one of the things we also found in this report is that there are critical times. The colleague at Wipro mentioned the life cycle approach. Well, in the women with 0 to 6-year-old children, this is the hardest part because this is really a focus where there is a need, because this is where they spend the most time in the unpaid care and will need that support to manage their career. So in terms of the investment, if we could go one back, please. Yes, so in investing, showing certainly that where higher GDP investments are in public expenditures and social protection and public care services, well then employment rates of women with families are higher. And throughout this region, GDP investments in care policies tend to be very low, unfortunately. For example, South Korea investing 1.9% of GDP, India 0.3%, Indonesia 0.2%, whereas countries like Sweden, Denmark invest over 8%. So this access to publicly funded and affordable high quality care for children and elders will allow these both women and men to expand their opportunities and to be more active both in companies, but also improving their skills and so on. So when we look at the infrastructures, this investment is really key. And I keep saying investment because often it's seen as a cost. So investing in care will generate jobs. By 2050, more than 46% of the population will be 60 or older. Women will be taking this up if no one else does, unless we invest in building those jobs. And increased investment in public care services to achieve the SDG would create 182 million more jobs by 2030 in this region. So off to the last, second to last slide, but it's really the last one. Really, it's important that we take this investment ahead and we can support workers in their evolving care responsibilities. I'd like to mention that the ILO, through its tripartite structure, has minimum floors of and agreed upon standards of what is work-family balance measures and lots of guidance, as well as things like maternity and paternity and setting up care systems and social protection systems. So there's a lot of guidance out there. We need to protect and value domestic work and care work sectors, which seems to be the biggest strategy used in the region at this point. And we really do need to increase women's voice and leadership in policy making, which is often missing. Now, the last slide is the 5R framework. And this is recognizing, reducing, and redistributing unpaid care, as well as valuing care, remunerating care with domestic work and care workers. So that it is equal pay for work of equal value, as well as their representation in social dialogue. So I'll end on that and hand back over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for that overview. And I'd like to assure all the participants that we'll be able to share the slides with you afterwards, so you can look at the details of 5Rs and so on. I would just like now to develop our discussion a little bit more and ask the panelists a little bit about what you see as some of the lessons learned new developments that are emerging from COVID-19, and really look at how we can use this momentum that's been highlighted by the experiences we're all having during this pandemic to accelerate the progress that you've all clearly illustrated that we need to see towards more integrated care solutions. Maybe Richa, would it be okay if I just turn to you first, because I think this is something you referred to as well at the beginning when you talked really about the context of COVID-19. So maybe you could just share your thoughts briefly. Richa, you're muted at the moment.
So we have seen a lot of governments expressing gratitude to healthcare workers and people expressing gratitude. I think this is a moment to now push the boundary beyond gratitude and beyond just healthcare workers to the larger carers and to the care economy, and come up with, much more concrete action. And by that, one thing that has emerged from the COVID, and which at Oxfam we really believe strongly, is that there's no substitute of the role that states and government can play. And there's no substitute to public spending on infrastructure, on health, on the care economy, and the need for urgent legislation. And even way back in 2017, Lancet had shown that only 50% of the governments were prepared to deal with this kind of a pandemic. So that's one. The second, I think this is also equally important now for the private sector, which was so big prior to the pandemic, to really step up. And we really need to see far more action from the private sector in contributing and in investing in the care economy. And third, it's also time to engage men and to have that kind of public campaigning to address social norms, so a kind of an integrated, but centralizing the whole issue of care economy, which is now, that's the huge learning from COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Richa. And actually, you've highlighted there the issue of regulation and the issue of the engagement of men. And that actually brings me to a question that we've had from our audience. One of our audience was asking about the opportunities for more sort of normative regulation around involving men in childcare, around paternity leave, around issuing guidance to governments around this kind of policy provision, which we've been hearing can be very important during this session. So I'm actually thinking, Richa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and then maybe I would also turn to Joni from the ILO perspective as well, to see what possible.
Speaking from the experience of India, where the government has earlier made this move, and speaking from the experience of a lot of countries like in Asia, where legislation of this kind on parental leave, on men taking time to devote to unpaid care work, does have a huge role to play, and it really provides the kind of impetus from above. But at large, I think there also has to be, working at the level of society, and where too, I think there can be, a lot can be done, and we've done that in parts of Philippines, where we work with local governments and private sector and the local village level, to really have those kind of campaigns to address social norms. So I would look at it as a two-way, both in terms of legislations, but to how do you really make laws work, you also have to address the social norms.
Thank you, Richa. I couldn't agree more that legislation and the social norm change have to be our dual focus. Thank you so much for that. And I think our time, I have to apologize to everyone, our time's a little bit short. So I'm going to just ask Joni as well, because I'd love to hear from ILO's perspective on this kind of idea of standard setting around paternity leave, parental leave, and encouraging men to play this role. But thank you very much, Richa. Over to you, Joni.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes, indeed, and indeed, as has been mentioned, timing is of the essence. We have a momentum right now with COVID-19. It's really put care work and unpaid care and paid care into the highlight as essential service, and so we need to really grasp on this. And in terms of standard setting, while a lot of the standards are already there, a lot of them aren't being picked up. And I would say in our structures, a lot of the guidance, even that comes back from the 70s, has been actually quite progressive, but is not yet implemented. So it's certainly an area where there could be further, and just to mention that in this region, the Maternity Protection Convention, which mandates paid leave of a minimum, and this is really the floor minimum of 14 weeks, has been ratified by no country in the region. So it doesn't mean that there isn't maternity protection, but this is something, this is showing that the core standards around gender equality, while two conventions on equal pay and non-discrimination are very strongly ratified, some of those others, Convention 156 on work and family balance, as well as social protection and maternity, are less ratified. And paternity is inside of the maternity protection. So this is definitely something that is there, but we need the mindset shift to make sure that it is a priority, because in the world of work, often it's the economy. It's not necessarily this other part of the economy that is not rendered visible, that is the top priority for governments, employers, and workers. But I must say that the workers in particular are quite progressive in pushing for new standards, in particular eliminating violence and harassment in the world of work. And they are a good ally when it comes to CSOs. And employers are doing a lot across the region as well. But these are strategies that are one at a time. We need public integrated approaches and governments to step up. And I think now is really the time. And we're talking a lot about building a better normal. It's really time to take action. And most of the people in decision-making positions are men. So let's put up the heat on men taking a step forward and he for she moving ahead for caring for care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joni, and I agree that this COVID moment does show us how many of these issues they can't be taken separately at all, and they are the lived experiences that make an enormous difference to what women can achieve. Thank you very much. Now I'm really sorry, I think that was a little connectivity problem. I'm back. Okay, I would really like to maybe turn to Sunita now, if I might, because I would love to hear the sort of private sector perspective on how you feel this COVID-19 situation could potentially create, or if you feel it can create momentum for positive change. Understanding that, of course, the economic impacts on the private sector are still being counted and have been quite tough. Thank you.
True, Sarah. So I think it's a very real situation that there are expectations about a woman caring for her family, just like there are expectations about a man caring for the family. So when you consider this holistically, companies' policies must be supportive of the need for its employees across genders to care for their family. So I wouldn't say policy should be only for women. I think policy should be gender neutral for all employees. So if you're talking about policies like work from home or parental leave, childcare at work, flexible timing, telecommuting, they're all recommended and enabled for all employees to care for their family. However, in my view, that should not be the only remedy, right? So these should just provide a stronger foundation for employees to balance work and home. But I believe that employees should also participate equally. And what do I mean by that? Participate equally in terms of probably creating balance by setting expectations on the home front and really investing in the personal support systems that they need to have. Specifically coming to the pandemic and what's happened with the pandemic, well, I feel that policies like work from home, telecommuting, etc., which might otherwise have taken years to stabilize, have quickly found acceptance as ways of working, right? So today we have less than 3% of our employees, for example, who are coming to work. 97% are at home, taking care of client expectations seamlessly. So this also means that people have had to adjust, because suddenly working from home has become a little difficult for people to get adjusted to. And we feel that people must adjust to these. And unfortunately, in a very short span of time, they've had to adjust to these from their homes. But I believe these are here to stay. So it is definitely a good opportunity for us to expand their use. And in my view, this would clearly help level the playing field for women greatly, at least in industries like technology. I think they're a big boom. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Sunita. Thank you, and very interesting to hear your perspective on how the world of work is likely to change as we go forward. I'm really sorry. I would like to very briefly now turn back to Nadira. And Nadira, I would like to just hear from you just in a couple of minutes, if that's okay. What are some of the trends that you've seen during COVID-19 that you think could be a positive momentum for the kind of work that you're doing in terms of providing a platform for supporting parents with care work? Over to you, Nadira. Thank you.
So I very much agree with Sunita when she mentioned about, how the whole COVID situation has actually pushed for a work at home, flexible working arrangement, using technology more to enable businesses and whatnot. So you're suddenly being forced to adopt and adapt to all that. And I must share this, that during the lockdown in Malaysia, the healthcare workers actually require childcare assistance because the childcare centers are closed, right? That forces people like us to come in and then provide care for the children into the comfort of their own home. And before this, they weren't looking at this at all. And childcare centers have been that. And we have also evolved from providing just care at one home to one family to now providing care for communal society. So it becomes a group of caring in one person's house. So that also allows us to expand and provide a more affordable care for a lesser amount of children under one roof. And so the childcare center concept has now been decentralized. There is also even greater demand for the kind of early education, intervention, enrichment that can be done also from home, because parents are still worried about sending their children back. And this is one of the things I think even big companies can support. Yeah, instead of providing childcare centers in their workspace or workplace, because now they're adopting flexible working arrangement and working from home. So the actual need for childcare does not have to be long hours anymore. It could be backup childcare, emergency childcare, short-term childcare, and this can call for many more women to come in and provide that kind of not just care work but even intervention. Like teaching, learning, or even helping parents manage their children's online classes. That alone is a real struggle for any mother, because children are now forced to learn from online. So there are many different ways for women to come in, and there's also opportunity for men to come in and start looking into potential care work, sports intervention, activities, enrichment, and whatnot. So yeah, these are the opportunities that we feel can be driven onwards, and that has been shown clearly, and we've been participating in that, and we feel that this is going to be one of the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Nadira, for that reflection. I really appreciate it. And I think before we're coming quite close to the end of our session now, and I'm quite close to the end of our time, but I would actually really like to turn back to Nona now. Because you did talk a little bit already at the beginning about obviously the COVID-19 perspective, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts as well around the question of what kinds of momentum we could really see to move forward positively from this situation. So Nona, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I mean, I think it's quite obvious. The COVID crisis has really reminded us all of how women and girls are amongst the most vulnerable in our societies. They are amongst the first to be impacted by layoffs and economic difficulties, and also those who suffer the most from the increase of gender-based violence. But we really have to consider this crisis is an opportunity to rebuild back better. And there I strongly believe that our efforts need to concentrate on putting women at the center of crisis management and post-crisis recovery. There is a strong need for all of the stimulus packages that many countries are designing. Those need to include a gender perspective. They need to include gender-sensitive investments and proper gender budgeting. And we in Europe, we believe very, very strongly about this. So the protection and promotion of the human rights of all women and girls is at the center of the Team Europe package of 20 billion euros that we have just adopted, and which is aimed at supporting partner countries affected by the crisis. This is one side of the opportunity to rebuild back better. And we also need the private sector on board to develop concrete tools. So I think both of these sides are really essential, and we have to work on this together.
Thank you so much, Nona, and I really appreciate the way that what you said is yes, identifying women's vulnerability and girls' vulnerability in this situation, but also really putting women at the center as economic actors and political actors who have to be part of planning and delivering solutions at this time as well. And I believe that our panelists have really exemplified that today. Now, we're just coming to the last couple of minutes of our session. So I would just like to round up by thanking our excellent panelists. I feel that we could have talked for a whole day about this issue. And I believe that, you know, one of the momentums that I really, truly believe we see during this COVID epidemic is a lot of different conversations happening between different players. I think we've always talked a lot about needing to come together and collaborate. But I personally am experiencing in my professional life that this is happening so much more at this time. And so I really just wanted to share that from UN Women's perspective, you know, we really see this search for an integrated solution and this piloting of integrated solutions and delivery of integrated solutions as something that has to be done as a coalition. And that's the kind of collaborative work that we've been starting. With enormous support from members on this panel and many other stakeholders as well. So what I really want to say is, while our panel discussion is coming to a close now, I really see this as just one part of a conversation and one part of a collaboration that has to continue. I'd also like to thank our audience very much. I'm so impressed that on the last afternoon of the forum, we've had a big audience and you've stuck with the session, so thank you very much. We've responded to some of your questions. I know we didn't have time to respond to all of them. I do want to emphasize that there are some materials that are being shared with you all and that I hope would go some way to addressing some of the additional questions you had for our panelists. And I hope that for you too, this will be part of a continuing conversation. So with that, I would like to bring the session to a close with thanks once again to our whole panel and also to Stefan, the Swedish ambassador, for being with us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That was excellent moderation and facilitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will now stop the recording and close the session, if that's all right with everyone.
Yes. Thank you so much, George, and thanks for your support, Jeremy. session. We appreciate it very much.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.